Human beings are not built to embrace truth easily. Carl Jung understood this with a clarity that was almost painful. He saw, again and again, that most people don't run from truth because they are ignorant, or even because they are weak, but because truth itself is heavy, disruptive, and merciless to the illusions we cling to. Comfort, on the other hand, is seductive. It asks nothing of us. It offers warmth without struggle, safety without exposure, belonging without authenticity. And so the majority will always choose comfort over truth, even when that comfort is a cage. To understand this, we must look at the way the human mind is wired. At the deepest level of our biology, we are survival-driven creatures. The nervous system is built to avoid danger, to minimize risk, to conserve energy. When the body perceives threat, it contracts. The mind does the same. Truth, in its raw form, is often threatening because it destabilizes the very structures that give us a sense of safety. To awaken to reality is to confront uncertainty, to step outside the familiar walls of belief, and to admit that much of what we depended on was illusion. This is terrifying to the psyche. The animal part of us craves familiarity, not freedom. Comfort is the narcotic we administer to ourselves in order to dull the ache of truth. We tell ourselves stories that make sense of the world, even when they are false. We agree collectively to rituals, traditions, and social performances that prevent us from asking dangerous questions. We cling to the masks we wear, masks of success, of politeness, of optimism, because they spare us the agony of exposure. Comfort allows us to keep living in a dream where nothing essential has to change. But like all drugs, its effects fade. Comfort can never last because it was never real. Jung noticed that people prefer to live in these carefully constructed illusions not because they are foolish, but because illusions provide order. The psyche dreads chaos, and truth often appears first as chaos. Imagine a person whose entire identity rests on being the good son, or the strong father, or the perfect employee. The moment truth whispers that these roles are costumes, not essence, the person feels a collapse in meaning. Without the mask, who am I? Without the role, what is left? Few are willing to face that abyss. So they tighten the mask, reinforce the illusion, and carry on as though nothing happened. But here lies the paradox Jung spoke of. The mask is not life. It is death disguised as life. Illusions are stagnant. They do not grow, they do not breathe, they do not nourish the soul. They merely preserve appearances. To live in illusion is to die slowly, to suffocate in a world of surfaces. And yet, because the mask is socially rewarded, because society smiles upon the agreeable employee, the obedient citizen, the cheerful friend, people mistake the applause of others for proof of life. In truth, they are only being rewarded for their successful performance in the theater of illusion. Comfort is not harmless. It does not merely delay awakening. It actively resists it. When we cling to false roles and false certainties, we build walls against the intrusion of truth. These walls harden into entire belief systems. They become political ideologies, rigid religious doctrines, cultural myths, and personal narratives. We tell ourselves, this is who I am, this is what life is, this is how the world works. These narratives function like armor. They protect us from questions we don't want to ask. But they also trap us inside a coffin of our own making. The more tightly we hold on to comfort, the more we suffocate beneath it. The danger of comfort is that it convinces us we are alive when we are not. True life, Jung argued, is dynamic, fluid, and in constant relationship with the unknown. It is unpredictable, it demands risk. Comfort, however, is repetitive. It keeps us walking in circles, replaying the same conversations, repeating the same habits, chasing the same empty validations. In comfort, we stagnate. We stop evolving. We lose contact with the living, breathing mystery of existence. We may avoid pain, yes, but we also avoid depth. We avoid transformation. This is why Jung said that awakening is not gentle. Awakening rips away the illusions of comfort, it burns the masks. It tears down the walls. And it does so mercilessly because truth has no interest in preserving the roles we play. Comfort is soft and warm. Awakening is cold and sharp. Comfort whispers, stay where you are, you're safe here. Awakening shouts, the safety is killing you. Comfort seduces us into sleep. Awakening forces us into the raw exposure of reality, and so most people never awaken. They do not fail to awaken because they cannot, but because they will not. They make the choice, consciously or unconsciously, to remain asleep. They choose illusion over truth because illusion feels kind. It feels manageable. It allows them to keep playing their roles without interruption. Jung was clear: awakening will always be rare, because the majority do not want it. They want to remain where the ground feels steady, even if it is steady only because it is false. The mask and the death of the false self. Carl Jung once said that the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world, is both necessary and dangerous. It is necessary because without some form of mask, society itself could not exist. We cannot reveal the full depth of our psyche to everyone we meet. The world would collapse into chaos if we did. But the persona becomes dangerous when we mistake it for our true self. When the mask hardens, when it fuses to the skin of the soul, it ceases to be a tool and becomes a prison. This prison, Jung warned, is a living death. To live entirely through the persona is not to live at all, but merely to perform existence. The tragedy of human life is that we are rewarded for our masks more than for our authenticity. From early childhood, we are trained to present a version of ourselves that others will accept. The quiet child learns to smile so adults will stop asking what is wrong. The rebellious child learns to hide their anger behind polite words so as not to be punished. The ambitious youth learns to display confidence even when trembling with insecurity, because society rewards appearances of strength. Layer by layer, the mask forms. It becomes the face we show to the world. And over time, many forget that a deeper self even exists beneath it. Jung insisted that this forgetting is not harmless. To live only as a mask is to suffocate the soul. The authentic self, the wild, untamed, contradictory essence of who we truly are, must breathe, or it withers. When we deny it, repress it, or bury it beneath layers of persona, it begins to rebel. Sometimes it rebels through dreams, sometimes through sudden bursts of emotion, sometimes through depression or illness. The psyche refuses to be silenced forever. It will tear at the seams of the mask until something breaks. But to awaken, to truly awaken, is not merely to glimpse the authentic self. It is to watch the mask burn away. And this is why Jung compared awakening to death. When the structures of identity collapse, it feels like being destroyed. If a person has spent their entire life believing themselves to be the good mother, the responsible worker, the faithful believer, or the strong man, then to lose those roles is to lose everything. The mask does not simply fall away. It crumbles, and with it the entire world of certainty that once gave life meaning. This collapse is terrifying. It is why so few dare to awaken. Jung described the process of individuation, the journey into wholeness, as a dangerous passage precisely because it requires the ego to die. The false self must be stripped away, and the ego resists this with every ounce of its strength. To the ego, the death of the persona feels like annihilation. And in a way it is. The self that dies is not the true self, but it does not know that. To the ego, there is no difference. The death of illusion feels identical to the death of being. Those who undergo this collapse describe it as a kind of psychic death. They lose interest in the roles they once played. They feel alienated from their families, their jobs, their communities. They look in the mirror and no longer recognize the face staring back. They experience an emptiness that cannot be filled by the old comforts. This emptiness is both the terror and the doorway. If they cling to the emptiness as despair, they will sink into nihilism. If they accept it as the clearing of illusion, they will step into a deeper life. Jung knew that most people cannot accept it. Most cannot tolerate the loss of identity, belonging, and certainty. This is why he said that awakening is rare, because to awaken is to undergo the death of the false self, and few have the courage to face death even while alive. Society reinforces this resistance. It does not want individuals who burn their masks, because such people cannot be easily controlled. A society of awakened individuals would be a society without rigid roles, without blind obedience, without the machinery of illusion. For this reason, society rewards conformity, not authenticity. It punishes those who strip away their masks. And yet, the path of the soul demands nothing less. To live behind the mask is to die without ever having lived. To burn the mask is to die to the false self in order to be reborn as the true self. This is why so many mystical traditions describe awakening as death and rebirth. The old self must die so that the deeper self may emerge. Jung did not invent this truth. He merely articulated it in the language of psychology. But its roots are ancient. Shamans, mystics, monks, and sages across centuries have all described the same fire, the burning away of the false to reveal the real. In the end, the mask will always fall. Whether by choice, by crisis, or by the inevitability of death, the persona cannot endure forever. The only question is whether we will willingly face its collapse in this life, or whether we will cling to it until the final moment when death itself rips it from our grasp. Jung urged us to face it now, to die before we die, to burn the mask while life still remains, so that the authentic self may finally breathe. The unbearable cost of truth awakening sounds beautiful when spoken of in books or lectures. The idea of stepping into authenticity, of living without illusions, of embodying truth, it inspires the soul. Yet Jung understood the reality. Very few will ever walk that path. Not because they are incapable of awakening, but because the cost feels unbearable. For most, the price of truth is too high. Approval must be surrendered. Identity must be dismantled. Certainty must dissolve. And to the ordinary mind, these losses are indistinguishable from death. Consider approval first. From the moment we are born, we crave the gaze of others. A baby looks into the eyes of its mother for recognition, for safety, for belonging. Approval becomes the currency of survival. As we grow, approval becomes the measure of worth. Parents reward obedience with affection. Teachers reward compliance with praise. Employers reward conformity with paychecks. Approval is not merely pleasant, it is tied directly to survival in a social species. To lose approval feels like exile, and exile feels like death. When awakening demands that we shed illusions, it often means disappointing others, breaking with tradition, refusing to play the roles others expect of us. Approval vanishes. Many cannot bear this, then there is identity. We spend decades constructing a self-image that feels solid. I am a kind person, I am a strong man, I am a loyal friend, I am a believer in this or that. These identities give structure to existence. They tell us who we are, and in telling us, they spare us from having to face the terrifying truth that the self is fluid, contradictory, and unknowable. Awakening tears down these identities. It reveals that the self we clung to was only ever a mask. To lose this identity is to stand naked in the unknown with nothing to cling to. Most people cannot tolerate this emptiness. They cling to their identity even if it suffocates them. And then there is certainty. Humans do not live well with uncertainty. We build religions, philosophies, scientific models, and political systems not because they are final truths, but because they protect us from the abyss of not knowing. Certainty is comfort. It gives us the illusion of ground beneath our feet. Awakening demands that certainty be abandoned. To awaken is to recognize that reality cannot be captured by dogma, that life cannot be reduced to formulas, that truth is not a possession, but a living mystery. For the ego, this feels like chaos. For the soul, it is liberation. But few are willing to trade the security of certainty for the vastness of mystery. Thus, the cost of truth is too high for most. People would rather keep their masks. They would rather continue the performance. They would rather live a life of illusion than face the collapse of approval, identity, and certainty. The performance may be hollow, but it is familiar. It may be lifeless, but it is safe. Illusion requires nothing but conformity, and society rewards it with comfort, belonging, and predictable meaning. Truth, on the other hand, strips all of this away. It leaves a person standing alone in the rawness of being, and so most turn away. Yet there is something cruel and beautiful about truth. It cannot be faked. One cannot pretend to awaken. One cannot put on the costume of truth while secretly clinging to illusion. The soul knows the difference. The body knows the difference. The psyche knows the difference. To fake truth is merely to build another mask, another illusion, another layer of performance. Awakening is merciless in this way. It demands authenticity, and authenticity cannot be imitated. And once truth is glimpsed, it can never be unseen. This is both its gift and its burden. Many stumble into truth accidentally through a moment of crisis, a mystical experience, a loss that shatters their illusions. In that moment, they see the falseness of the life they were living. They see the fragility of the mask. They see the emptiness of approval, identity, and certainty. They may turn away, they may run back to illusion, but they will never again believe in it fully. Once glimpsed, truth haunts them. It whispers at the edges of their mind. It calls them back, no matter how fiercely they resist. Jung saw this paradox with perfect clarity. He knew that once a person awakens, even slightly, they can never again return fully to sleep. The illusions may still tempt them. The masks may still cling to their face. The performances may still be acted out. But something within them has shifted irreversibly. They know that the approval of others is hollow. They know that the identity they wear is fragile. They know that certainty is a dream. And because they know, their soul is restless. This restlessness is the mark of the awakened, even if they resist the awakening. It is the hunger for truth that will not die, no matter how much comfort they pour over it. It is the ache of authenticity trying to break through the walls of illusion. It is the pain of having glimpsed reality and realizing that nothing less will ever satisfy. This is why awakening, once begun, cannot be undone. One may resist it, deny it, drown it in distraction, but the seed has been planted, and seeds, once planted, grow. So Jung warned, truth is not kind. It does not soothe like comfort. It does not flatter like illusion. It does not bend to the needs of approval, identity, or certainty. It is merciless, and yet it is alive. To embrace it is to lose everything false and to gain everything real. To refuse it is to keep the mask, keep the performance, keep the prison of illusion, and call it life. The choice remains with us. Few will choose the path of truth. But for those who do, there is no going back. The cold fire of awakening. Jung spoke often of thresholds. There are moments in life where a person approaches the border between illusion and reality, between the false self and the authentic self. To cross that threshold is to step into fire. And not a warm, comforting fire, but a cold one, an awakening that burns without warmth, a purging that consumes without consoling. He knew what few are willing to admit. The majority will turn back at this threshold. The fire of truth is too severe for most. Why do so many retreat? Because illusion is seductive. Illusion offers ground to stand on, while awakening strips the ground away. Illusion offers belonging, while awakening isolates. Illusion offers certainty, while awakening dissolves it. The human mind is not naturally inclined to walk into emptiness. It clings to anchors, even if those anchors are lies. It clings to familiar roles, even if those roles suffocate the soul. Illusion may be death disguised as life, but it feels safe. Truth may be life disguised as death, but it feels like annihilation. Faced with this choice, most people prefer the mask. Jung used the word individuation to describe the path of awakening, but the word itself cannot capture the violence of the process. To individuate is to become whole, but wholeness is not added to the self like a new ornament. Wholeness comes by way of subtraction. It comes by stripping away everything false, everything borrowed, everything imposed by culture, family, and fear. The process does not build up the self, it dismantles it. It tears away the borrowed beliefs, the imposed identities, the unconscious patterns, until what remains is raw and undeniable. This is why the path feels like fire. Imagine carrying a bundle of cherished objects, beliefs, traditions, habits, relationships, and walking into a flame that incinerates them all. At first there is panic. How can I survive without these? Who am I without my identity? Where will I stand without certainty? What will I do without belonging? The fire answers with silence. It does not console. It does not negotiate. It simply burns. And in its burning, it reveals what was never true to begin with. But this is also why so few continue. Most step close to the fire, feel its searing coldness, and recoil. They rush back to the familiar world of illusion, telling themselves the fire is madness, the truth is dangerous, the old life is safer. And society agrees with them. The retreat is rewarded with applause. You've come back to your senses. You've remembered who you are. You belong with us again. The performance resumes. The mask is restored and the fire is forgotten, at least on the surface. For the few who continue, however, the journey becomes merciless. The fire does not stop once entered. It keeps stripping away, layer after layer. First, the easy illusions fall, the superficial roles, the obvious lies. Then the deeper structures begin to crumble, the inherited beliefs, the unquestioned assumptions, the collective myths. And finally, the very ground itself collapses. Even the idea of self begins to dissolve. One finds oneself standing not upon certainty, but upon nothingness. This nakedness is terrifying. Without beliefs, without borrowed identities, without the safety of performance, one feels utterly alone. The psyche wails for something solid, something familiar, some shred of illusion to cling to. But if the person endures, if they do not run back, if they do not rebuild the mask, they discover something astonishing. Beneath the fire, beneath the stripping, beneath the annihilation, there remains a core that cannot be destroyed. A self deeper than the self? A reality deeper than the illusions? Jung called this the self with a capital Se, the archetype of wholeness, the center of the psyche, the true ground of being. This self is not an identity. It cannot be described by roles or beliefs. It does not belong to culture or society. It is not good or bad, not bound by approval or rejection. It simply is. And it can only be known once everything false has fallen away. This is the paradox. The fire strips us to nothing, yet in that nothingness, the true foundation is revealed. The mask dies, the persona collapses, the illusions burn, but what remains is indestructible. And yet, Jung knew, most will never walk this far. The fire is too cold, the stripping is too severe. The nakedness is too unbearable. Most will turn back, and in turning back, they will call it wisdom. They will call it balance. They will call it maturity. In truth, it is simply fear. But the few who endure, the few who let the fire consume everything, are reborn into a life that cannot be shaken. They no longer live for approval, for identity, for certainty. They live from the ground of being itself, raw and free. For this reason, the path of awakening has always been described as both death and birth. It is death to illusion, death to the false self, death to the mask. But it is also birth into truth, into reality, into the undying self. This is why the mystics, the sages, the visionaries of every tradition speak with the same voice. To find yourself, you must first lose yourself. To live, you must first die. Jung, standing in the lineage of these voices, translated the ancient fire into the language of psychology. He knew that the path was merciless. He also knew it was the only path that led to life. Beyond the illusion, the only thing real, there is no way back once truth has been glimpsed. This is the final and merciless law of awakening. Jung saw it in patient after patient, and it is written across the testimonies of mystics, poets, and seekers across time. Once the veil has been lifted, even for a moment, the old illusions never fit again. A person may try to return. They may rebuild the mask, rejoin the performance, chase again the comfort of belonging. But somewhere inside, a fracture remains. They know, they cannot unknow. Truth, once revealed, haunts like a ghost, whispering at the edges of every illusion, "This is false," and you know it. And so the path, once entered, can never be fully abandoned. The false self may try to reassert itself, but its death has already begun. The persona may still cling, but the fire has already touched it. The illusions may still glitter, but their shine has dulled. For the one who has truly glimpsed truth, life becomes a choice between two sufferings, the suffering of illusion or the suffering of awakening. The first is the pain of stagnation, the slow suffocation of living a lie. The second is the pain of transformation, the burning away of everything false. One suffocates the soul. The other frees it. To endure the fire is to embrace the second suffering, and in time to find that it is no suffering at all. The death of the false self feels like annihilation, but what dies is only what was never real. Approval, identity, certainty, all of it was borrowed, imposed, constructed. When these collapse, nothing essential is lost. The true self, Jung taught, is not fragile. It does not depend on roles, on the praise of others, on the shifting sands of belief. It simply is. And when all illusions have been stripped away, what remains is the self-silent, indestructible, free. This freedom is not the freedom of comfort. It is not the freedom of doing whatever one pleases or of escaping pain. It is deeper, stranger, more unshakable. It is the freedom of no longer being bound by illusion. The awakened one is no longer compelled to perform for approval, to cling to identity, to defend certainty. They may still play roles in society, but they know they are roles. They may still participate in beliefs and traditions, but they are not enslaved by them. They may still walk among the sleeping, but they are awake. And because they are awake, they are free. This freedom is what every soul longs for, though most never name it. Beneath the hunger for wealth, success, recognition, or love, there is a deeper hunger, the hunger to be real. The hunger to touch something that cannot be taken away, that does not depend on masks or illusions. Awakening satisfies this hunger, but only by stripping away everything else. It gives us what is real by burning away everything false. And because of this, it is both feared and desired, resisted and sought, rejected and worshipped. Jung's warning echoes here: the path is not for the many. It will never be. The majority will always turn back, will always choose the sweetness of illusion over the bitterness of truth. But for the few, for the ones who endure the cold fire, who let the false self die, there is no greater gift. They discover the ground of being itself, the unshakable core, the silent truth at the heart of existence. They discover that what they thought was death was life, and what they thought was life was death. And so we arrive at the paradox that closes the journey. To awaken is to die, but it is also to live for the first time. The false self dies, but the true self emerges. The illusions collapse, but reality shines through. Approval, identity, certainty vanish, but what remains cannot be touched by time or death. This is what Jung pointed toward in his careful and unflinching language, that beyond illusion lies the only thing that has ever been real. The mask will fall. The fire will come. The false self will die. The only question is whether we will resist until the end, or whether we will allow the burning to strip us now, in this life, while freedom still awaits. For those who dare, the promise remains: beyond illusion, beyond death, beyond fear, there is truth, and truth, once seen, will never be unseen.